We know some basic statistics that are really important for us to remember. Most kids in foster care live out of the home about a year. So that's important for us to know. We also know that the largest age group of kids who are in foster care are 2 to 4 years old. So truly some of the most vulnerable in our society at an incredibly important point in their development. We know that aging out at 18 is a big issue for our kids. A national study unfortunately found that 1 in 5 will become homeless shortly thereafter. It's why we have an awful lot of programs in Wisconsin where we want to help those foster kids. They have access to Badger Care. We have some of those already built into the system. But even with the safety nets that are there, we see far too many kids falling through the cracks. Unfortunately, only about half will be employed by the time they're age 24. So they are incredibly reliant on government assistance and the continuing largesse of the taxpayers, which of course, I think most of us would agree it's a population we don't mind spending on, but we also want to try to figure out ways to help make them independent and self-sufficient, which really I think every citizen wants, no matter what their background is. In foster care, about 60% of the children are boys, and half of the girls are incarcerated, unfortunately, at some point in their life.
That was good.
That surprised me a little bit.
Wow, you think I'm not athletic or what? Holy cow.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, okay, thanks a lot, Santa. So here are some of the things that I have asked the members to really explore in this task force. Number one, look for ways to better support those who have aged out of that foster care system, as I mentioned. How do we deal with education? How do we deal with job training? How do we make sure they have adequate access to housing so that they are able to get employment and keep it? We want to try to remove the barriers from the foster care system that really prevent it working as well as it should. I think many of us have personal stories either with a family member or a family friend or constituents who are frustrated with the current system. I actually met with some folks from my district in Union Grove who are foster care parents. They tried really hard to become that. It took a while because the process is rigorous. One of the folks is actually a teacher, and she saw a child inside her classroom go in and out of foster care on a multiple time basis in the same school year. Literally taken out of the home, shortly thereafter put back, taken out a second time, and gone back a second time, all in one school year. So we really worry about how is that child developing, and I appreciate the fact that we want to reunite families as quickly as we are able, but we also want to double check and make sure what we are doing is in the best interest of the entire family, not just the parents. We also want to look and make sure that we have evidence-based assistance to help those at-risk families before they are entering the child welfare system, because if there are ways that we can help earlier to be able to save money in the long run, I think that makes an awful lot of sense. So I think there's a lot of issues that we are going to talk about, and I am excited for us to have our 6th Speakers Task Force take place. I think if you look at our history in the Assembly, from the ones really from where it was a bipartisan effort in the beginning, with Sandy Pash and Eric Peterson on mental health, continuing on with Alzheimer's, dementia, our Rural Schools Task Force, Urban Task Force, and then Youth Workforce Readiness. This one really fits perfectly into finding a real problem that is in Wisconsin and hopefully a bipartisan solution to fix it. And that's why today I am excited to announce that Representative Pat Snyder of Wausau will be the Republican co-chair, and we have asked Peter Barca to appoint a Democrat co-chair. So unlike our past Speakers Task Forces, where it's been a Republican chair and a Democratic vice chair, to try to reach out and continue to find that bipartisan consensus in a way that we do most of the time, it'll actually be a co-chair from each political party. So I want to turn it over to Representative Snyder to talk a little bit about his vision, and my hope is that the task force will actually have its first meeting shortly after the 4th of July holiday, because we'd like to get them going and moving as quickly as possible. So Representative Schneider.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Speaker Voss, for your commitment on identifying and solving some of the specific problems that are currently existing in our foster care program here in the state. I am very honored and very excited to begin my role as a co-chair. I have somewhat of a background in the foster care. The last few years I've been on the administrative review panel for the Marathon County Social Services Department. What we do there is after a judge puts a court order that usually removes a child from their home and their parents, we review that in 6 months to see if the order is going through. And you can see the challenges that some of the social workers, the foster kids, the foster parents, and even the parents that do come, if they come, are facing. And we want to rectify that, because when I've done a lot of studying on the adverse childhood experience, the ACEs, so much is imprinted on a child between birth, 6 and 8 years of age. And if we somehow can help remove them from a traumatic environment at an earlier age and put into a stable environment with some great foster parents, the more chances we are that they will be successful and not become part of the system. I do know too, through the review panel that I'm on, that when they do age out, it is difficult. The speaker is right. We've had some 18-year-olds actually become homeless or couch surf, which in my mind is homelessness anyway. We also have children that, well, even in foster care, they find themselves getting into trouble. Maybe that was because of the time that they were removed from their home. And I think one other problem, and I'm anxious to see when we go around the state if it's similar, is at least in Marathon County, a lot of our foster parents are starting to get elderly. And I think, at least when I've talked to the head of the foster recruiting in Marathon County, she says they would love to get more younger couples or younger people involved. So that's an area we also have to look for. I think it's important for role models to be positive in the lives of these kids. I know I had a tremendous experience as a big brother with a young second grader, Berkeley, and kind of mentored him and was with him as was a single mom. And now he's graduated from high school and going to play football at UWSP. So a great success story. And when you see that happen, it just makes you just feel so proud of that individual. So the task force, I think, plays some key roles, and we're going to address the challenges. I think provide relief to those who have entered the foster care system, those that are aging out of the foster care system, and providing assistance to prevent at-risk families from entering this system in the first place. So we'll hold public hearings across the state, listen to families, children's experts, all in these areas, gather up the information with the greatest concerns. What more can we, the state, do for them and for the folks and the kids? And then put forward policy initiatives that will have strong impact on the foster care community down the road. So I tell you, I look forward. This is a bipartisan issue. We're talking kids, so politics shouldn't be involved. I'm so happy to have a Democrat co-chair, to be a colleague. I know that on children and families, I have some great Democrat representatives on the committee that have a wealth of experience in this area. So I'll look forward to meeting them. And again, I'm honored to be a co-chair and ready to get this task force going. Thank you.
Maybe we could take questions first on foster care and the speaker's task force, and then if you have other things, we can talk about those afterward.
Who else is going to be on the committee? Who else are you going to?
There we go. So the Democrats have not been named yet. I met with Peter Barca this morning just to confirm that he is fully on board with trying to work on this topic. My hope is that he'll have folks named shortly, either this week or potentially by next week Friday, so that hopefully the following week sometime, if the co-chairs agree, that they could get moving to try to get some positive things happening for the fall session, or worst case scenario, hopefully we could have something passed by next spring.
You kind of mentioned some public hearings. When do you think those would start?
Hopefully the week of the 10th of July. That right after we get through the 4th, we still have to get logistics of locations. Pretty much, we're thinking probably a Madison area. Milwaukee, I'm sure would be one. I'd like to have one up in the Wausau area. So we'll get with the other representatives and my co-chair and try to work out locations, especially get input from my colleagues here on their areas to see if it would be important to bring it to them.
And I think one of the things that's been most successful in our other speakers task forces is the opportunity to go around the state and really hear from people who are directly impacted, not ask them to travel to the Capitol and testify, but really be in their home area, hearing from people who, just left work because they can't afford to drive all the way here. So I think that's why hopefully if we have as wide a berth as possible, it could be half a dozen or more hearings as we go around the state to really learn the problems with foster care. And that's why, while we'd love to have stuff for the fall, it might not be until a bit later, depending on how the committee works.
Is there any, and maybe you mentioned it, I missed it, but is there any need for more people to open their doors to foster children and take them in? Is that part of it? Is there a shortage there? Are families willing to do that?
You know, in general, we have been lucky in Wisconsin that for the most part, there is not a severe shortage of folks who take in foster care kids. But I think Pat brought up the best point, that an awful lot of folks who have been doing it for a while, and we could do a better job of recruiting folks to be in the pipeline so that when we know people begin to age out of being foster parents, that we have more people available. So that's a real focus. When you hear how much foster parents are reimbursed to take care of a foster child, it is a very small amount of money. So double check the number, but I have been told it's around $400 a month. So when you really think about the cost of taking care of a child, there's some financial burden that we want to look at too. So the point of this task force is to not just focus on more money, but is to find how do we make the system better. But it might be part of the recommendations that we could do a better job reimbursing costs, or perhaps people who have special needs or things like that. So I think we want it to be wide ranging and to really look at the topic, because I have to plead my own ignorance on some of these topics. I have a general idea, but I think a lot of it really is taking the time to learn about the issues, to understand the concerns of the families and the kids, and then try to address them rather than coming in saying we have all these answers that are already preconceived.
I don't know much about the foster care system. Is the rate a flat amount for all children, or do you pay a different amount for a 2 or 3-year-old versus a 16 or 17-year-old?
Well, I know we have some advocates who are in the back watching the press conference who could probably answer that question now or later. I don't want to give the wrong answer because I'm just not quite sure.